They pulled up at dawn in two black SUVs with flashing lights bolted to the roof, red and blue strobing against the pines like some Hollywood crime scene. Heavy boots crunched across my gravel driveway, and 7 men in matching black uniforms fanned out, barking orders like they were conducting a raid. One of them slammed his fist on my cabin door, shouting, "FBI, open up." But here's the thing, I am FBI. And I knew in one glance, these weren't federal agents. Their badges were plastic, their patches read HOA Police Division, and their belts carried nothing but cheap handcuffs and intimidation. They weren't here for justice. They were here because Karen Whitfield and her board thought they could stage a fake arrest to scare me off my own property. What they didn't know was that by pretending to be the law, they just walked into the one trap no con artist ever survives. Because if there's one thing an FBI agent knows, it's how to spot a fraud before the fraud even knows he's been caught. So let me take you back to where this insane HOA war really began, and show you how a bunch of wannabe cops tried to arrest the wrong man. Before we dive in, tell me this. What's the craziest stunt your HOA ever pulled? Drop it in the comments. I'll bet it doesn't top mine. My name is Daniel Cross, 57 years old, recently retired from active duty, but still serving in a federal capacity most people don't even know exists. To my neighbors, I'm just the quiet man at the edge of Ridgeview Lake, the one who rebuilt his grandfather's old cabin and keeps to himself. But to Karen Whitfield, the self-proclaimed queen of our HOA, I'm public enemy number 1. The war started small. Ridiculous fines taped to my door for unauthorized bird feeders, grass-length violations, and even non-regulation curtains. At first I laughed it off, paid no mind, figured she'd find another target soon. But then, when she discovered who I actually was, an agent with a badge that outranked her entire boardroom, something inside her seemed to snap. She stopped seeing me as a neighbor and started seeing me as a threat to her power. That's when the game turned dark. I'd catch strange cars parked near my property at night, HOA board members snooping with flashlights, and anonymous complaints piling up in county offices about me harboring dangerous materials. Each move designed to corner me, isolate me, and force me out. But Karen didn't realize one thing. I've faced drug cartels, cyber criminal syndicates, and men who move weapons across borders. If she thought a stack of fines and a neighborhood committee could break me, she had no idea who she was really dealing with. And still, nothing could have prepared me for the morning she escalated beyond fines and fake letters, and sent her own police force to drag me out of my cabin. It was a Saturday morning, just past 6 a.m., when I heard the engines outside. I stepped to my window and pulled the curtain back only an inch, just enough to watch without being seen. 2 black SUVs idled in my driveway, their cheap magnetic sirens pulsing red and blue across the pines. 7 men piled out, dressed in black tactical pants, boots, and jackets, with bold yellow letters stenciled across the back, HOA Police Division. I almost laughed. Almost. But the seriousness of their movements stopped me. They weren't playing dress-up. They were trying to look like a federal raid team, and to an untrained eye, they might have pulled it off. To me, they were a bad copy. The formation was sloppy. Their radios weren't even on the same frequency. I could hear the static bleed, and one guy's belt still had the price tag dangling from a pair of plastic cuffs. But here's what made me pause: their confidence. They stormed up my driveway like they owned it, barking orders into the air, one pounding on my door with the side of his fist. "FBI, open up!" he shouted, but the badge on his chest read nothing but HOA Enforcement Unit. The irony was almost too much to take. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just waited, listening, analyzing, cataloging every mistake they made. Because here's the thing. When a man with my training keeps quiet, it's not out of fear, it's strategy. And the moment I stepped out that door, their little charade would collapse in on itself. And then, just as I suspected, the ringleader appeared, Karen Whitfield herself, heels clicking against the gravel as if she were strutting a runway. Instead of walking into a federal crime scene she didn't even know she was committing, she had on a blazer 2 sizes too big. Clutching a leather binder stuffed with papers she waved around like warrants. "Men, secure the perimeter," she barked, her voice shrill but commanding in its own way. The officers scattered, two heading toward my dock, another circling toward the back of my cabin, like a poorly rehearsed play. Karen planted herself at the front porch steps, binder held high, glaring at my door. "Daniel Cross," she shouted, her voice echoing off the trees. "By order of the Homeowners Association, you are under arrest for repeated violations of community code." Arrest. Violations. She said the words like she was starring in a courtroom drama, and the men around her nodded as if this fantasy had real weight. To any neighbor peeking from their curtains, it might have looked like the FBI was really here. But from where I stood, it was almost pathetic, except for one thing. She was serious. Dead serious. Her eyes burned with the satisfaction of someone who thought she'd finally outsmarted the man who refused to bow to her rules. She believed this ridiculous charade was power. She believed she could drag me from my cabin in front of the whole community, humiliate me and drive me out once and for all. What Karen didn't know was that every word she spoke, every fake badge flashed, every staged order barked, was another nail in her own coffin, and I hadn't even opened the door yet. I waited until the pounding on the door reached a fever pitch, then slowly pulled it open. The morning light spilled across my porch, and there I stood, calm, hands at my sides, no fear in my face. The man at the front, the one with the shiny new cuffs, puffed up his chest and barked, "Step outside! You're under arrest!" I tilted my head, studying him the way I used to study suspects in interrogation rooms. His badge was tilted, the laminate peeling at the edge. His belt holster was plastic, the kind sold in dollar stores. I almost smiled. Karen's eyes lit up triumphant. "Finally," she snapped. "You thought you could ignore us, but the law is here now. The law." I let the word hang in the air, then leaned forward slightly. "Do you even know the crime you're committing right now?" I asked quietly. Confusion rippled across their faces. Karen scoffed. "Impersonating an officer? Please. We are the officers of this community." That was her fatal flaw. She believed her fantasy so deeply, she couldn't see the cliff she was standing on. I crossed my arms, my voice even. "Ma'am, you just turned a neighborhood dispute into a federal matter, and I promise you, it won't end the way you think." One of the men stepped forward, metal cuffs in hand, his hands shaking just enough for me to notice. He grabbed for my wrists like he thought this would be quick. Rookie mistake. I shifted half a step, and in one smooth move, his arm was twisted behind his back, the cuffs dangling uselessly in the air. I didn't need force, just precision. He froze, grunting in pain, while the others looked at each other, unsure if they should jump in or back off. Karen's face went scarlet. "Don't just stand there. Arrest him," she screamed. Two more rushed forward, but I released the first man and he stumbled straight into them like bowling pins. They weren't trained, they weren't disciplined. They were neighbors in costumes, drunk on the idea of authority. I stood tall on the porch, not a bead of sweat on me. "You want to play cops and robbers?" I said, voice low. "Fine. But understand this, you just tried to lay hands on a federal agent." Silence. The words hit them like a stone dropped in still water. Karen blinked, stunned, then barked a laugh. "Federal agent, please. That's your excuse?" But I could see it in the men's eyes. The doubt, the cracks in her fantasy. For the first time, they weren't sure who they should be afraid of more, Karen, or me. I reached slowly into my jacket, watching their hands twitch toward their belts. "Easy," I said, calm as ever. "If you were real officers, you'd know the difference between a threat and a man showing you credentials." I pulled out my leather badge wallet and flipped it open. The gold seal glinted in the morning sun, unmistakable to anyone who'd ever seen the real thing. The men froze. Their cheap patches suddenly felt like toys sewn onto Halloween costumes. Karen leaned in, squinting, her face twisting. "That's fake. He's bluffing. Don't believe him." But her voice cracked, and everyone heard it. One of the younger guys actually stepped back, his boots scraping the gravel. "Wait, if he's FBI," he stammered, but Karen cut him off with a shriek. "He's lying. Do your job." I let the silence drag, the kind of silence I'd used in interrogation rooms to make criminals sweat. Then I said it, low and steady, "Impersonating a federal officer is a felony. Right now you're all in over your heads. And Karen, you just dragged them into the fire with you." The men glanced at each other, unease spreading like wildfire. For the first time, Karen wasn't the one in control. The shouting must have carried farther than Karen expected, because blinds started shifting in the nearby houses. Porch lights flicked on and curious faces peeked through curtains. Her grand performance, meant to humiliate me, was suddenly turning into a spectacle she couldn't control. One of the men whispered nervously, "Karen, people are watching." She snapped her head at him, eyes blazing. "Good, let them see him dragged out. That's the point." But her words rang hollow, brittle. I could see the doubt spreading among her so-called officers. Men who just wanted HOA discounts and a pat on the back, not felony charges. One of them muttered. He showed a real badge. "I'm not going to prison for this." Karen's face twisted, desperation leaking through her confidence. She clutched her binder tighter, waving papers like a shield. "He's lying. He's bluffing. He has no power here. I run this community." Her voice cracked on the last word, and the neighbors heard it. From across the street, a voice called out, "Karen, what are you doing?" She froze. The audience she craved had arrived, but instead of cheering her on, they were watching her unravel. I didn't need to say a word. The cracks in her empire were spreading on their own. From across the street, a screen door slammed. Old Mr. Grady, the kind of neighbor who never missed a thing, stepped out with his phone in hand. "Sheriff's already on the line," he called, his voice steady. "They'll be here any minute." Karen whipped around, fury in her eyes. "Hang up that phone right now," she barked, pointing like she could command the entire block. But it was too late. The panic rippled through her officers. One of them cursed under his breath, tugging nervously at his fake badge. Another yanked the magnetic siren off the SUV roof and stuffed it in the back seat like that would erase what had just happened. "Karen, we can't. This is serious," one stammered, but she spun on him with venom. "Don't you dare quit on me now. You signed up for this. You said you'd back me up." Her voice was shrill, cracking under the weight of reality. I stepped forward, folding my arms. "Backing you up means facing federal charges now," I said evenly. "You want them to go down with you, Karen? Or are you ready to admit this charade is over?" Her face went pale, lips trembling. But she still wouldn't yield. Pride had dug her grave, and she was too stubborn to climb out. The wail of real sirens cut through the tension, echoing off the houses like a warning bell. A marked county cruiser rolled up, lights flashing, and Sheriff Dwayne Carter himself stepped out, a broad man, with silver hair, steady eyes, and the kind of presence that made even the toughest men shift uncomfortably. The fake officers froze, caught like kids with their hands in the cookie jar. Karen plastered on a smile so forced it looked painful. "Oh, thank goodness you're here, Sheriff," she called sweetly, marching forward as if she'd summoned him. "This man here is trespassing, dangerous, unstable, and these fine gentlemen were helping me detain him until you arrived." Sheriff Carter glanced at her, then at me. His eyes narrowed when he saw the badges in the cheap SUV parked crooked at the curb. "Helping you?" he said slowly, his voice heavy with suspicion. I didn't move, didn't flinch. I simply reached into my wallet and flipped open my credentials with practiced ease. His eyes scanned the seal, and in an instant his posture changed. He stepped closer, his tone dropping low. "Agent Daniels?" he asked, a hint of respect in his voice. I gave a single nod. Karen's smile faltered, confusion flashing across her face. The sheriff turned sharply to the fake cops. "You boys want to tell me exactly who you think you are?" The moment Sheriff Carter's tone shifted, the so-called officers broke. One of them muttered, "I'm not sticking around for this," and bolted toward the SUV. Another ripped off his fake badge and tossed it into the dirt like shedding evidence could erase the crime. The sheriff barked, "Stay where you are." But their panic was louder than his command. Tires screeched as one vehicle lurched into reverse, backing halfway into a neighbor's mailbox before speeding off down the road. Karen shrieked, "Cowards, all of you, don't you dare leave me here." She scrambled after them, binders still clutched in her hands, papers spilling into the gravel like confetti. Desperation poured from every word. "Sheriff, you don't understand. He's manipulating you. He's not FBI. He's a fraud. He's dangerous." But her voice was drowned by the sound of neighbors gathering, phones out, cameras recording. Every lie she told was now being documented, every crack in her fantasy immortalized. I stepped forward, steady, my voice carrying without force. "Karen, the only dangerous thing here is your delusion. And you just dragged your neighbors into a federal crime. Sheriff Carter folded his arms, his gaze fixed on her trembling figure. Karen Whitfield, he said grimly, you've got a lot of explaining to do. Karen's hands shook as she tried to gather the scattered papers from the gravel, clutching them like they were her lifeline. She spun toward the neighbors, her voice shrill, frantic. Don't listen to him. He's lying. He forged that badge. He's the criminal here. But the words rang hollow. The neighbors didn't believe her, not after seeing the fake uniforms and hearing the sheriff address me with respect. One woman from the crowd shouted back, Karen, we've had enough of your nonsense. Another man held up his phone, recording every second. Karen's face crumbled under the weight of the eyes on her. Still, she forced a laugh, brittle and broken. You'll all regret this. I run this community. I make the rules. Her voice cracked, desperation bleeding through arrogance. I took a slow step forward, meeting her gaze. No, Karen, rules don't make themselves. And you just proved you don't even respect the real ones. She froze, her chest rising and falling in sharp bursts. Sheriff Carter placed a heavy hand on her shoulder. That's enough, he said, firm. For the first time all morning, Karen didn't argue. Her binder slipped from her grasp, pages fluttering into the dirt. Her empire had fallen, and all she could do was stand in the ruins. The crowd went quiet as Sheriff Carter straightened, his voice carrying over the lake breeze. Folks, I want you all to understand something. Impersonating a federal officer is not just a violation of HOA rules. It's a felony punishable by prison time. Murmurs rippled through the neighbors, some gasping, others whispering in disbelief. Karen's face drained of color. She opened her mouth to protest, but I stepped forward and spoke first, my tone calm and final. My name is Special Agent Daniel Cross. I've worked with the Bureau for over 30 years, and what happened here today will be handled at the highest level. Gasps turned into a stunned silence, the fake badges, the costumes, the binder. It all seemed like a child's game compared to the reality now laid bare. Sheriff Carter gave a slow nod, his eyes meeting mine. Agent Cross, I'll see to it the county files charges. This community's had enough of her circus. Karen shook her head violently, backing away, muttering, No, this isn't how it's supposed to end. I was in charge, but no one listened. Phones were still recording, every second preserved. Her authority had evaporated, her audience turned against her, her soldiers gone. And as the sheriff guided her toward the cruiser, the truth finally settled on everyone, Karen. Whitfield had tried to play queen, but in the end she'd declared war on the wrong man. And that, my friends, was the day Karen Whitfield's so-called empire collapsed, not because of my fists, not because of shouting, but because truth doesn't bend to ego. She brought fake cops, fake laws, and fake authority to my doorstep, and left in the back of a real sheriff's cruiser. If you've ever dealt with an HOA that thinks they're above the law, you know how satisfying it is to see justice finally catch up. But here's what I want to know. What's the craziest thing your HOA, your neighbor, or your community ever tried to pull on you? Drop it in the comments because I read every single one, and your story might just end up in the next video. And if you enjoyed watching Karen's downfall as much as I enjoyed telling it, hit that like button, share this with a friend who hates HOA drama, and make sure you subscribe to HOA Rule Rage so you don't miss the next wild battle. Trust me, the war with entitled neighbors is far from over.